Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today I'm going to be bringing you my beginner's guide for Stellar Blade. This title was sent to me by PlayStation Portugal so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. Now, one of the first things that I want to start by showing you is going to be the game's UI, because I most definitely remember feeling a little bit overwhelmed when I first started playing the demo for Stellar Blade. So, if you'll take a notice here on the bottom left-hand side, you'll see that we have a bunch of gauges. We're going to be going over those one by one. The very first one has the little red squares, and it is called BU. That one refers to your burst gauge. Now, burst gauge is used whenever you perform burst skills, which you can do by pressing R1 and the corresponding faceplate buttons, and you will notice that we will consume a couple of those pips. They regenerate automatically because we are in training mode, but obviously during the game you'll have to actually do things in order to regenerate those pips back. But basically that is what that gauge is for. You're going to be using it whenever you use these special burst abilities. Now I'm going to be going a little bit more in depth into the burst abilities further in the video. For now, just know that that is what it's there for. Also, be aware that the burst gauge is not going to be available at the beginning of the game. This is something that gets introduced to you a little bit later down the line, but since it has basic functionality and doesn't really involve any types of spoilers, I figured I would mention it as well. Now, the one immediately below that, it's got the little blue squares, and it is called BE. That one is for beta skills. It is pretty much the same thing as burst skills, except this one is available since the very beginning, and you're going to be using L1 to access the different abilities instead of R1. So if you press L1 and triangle, we get this, and you'll notice it uses some of those beta points, and then it gets regenerated automatically because we are in training, but when you are actually playing the game, you're going to need to perform several actions to reload those. A little bit further ahead in the video, I will be talking more about these as well. Immediately below that, you have your HP gauge, which is fairly self-explanatory. That is your hit points. If those reach 0, you die. And then immediately below that, you have your shield. Now, the shield is particularly important because one of the things that you will notice is that there isn't a stamina gauge. So if there isn't a stamina gauge, what exactly does that mean for the things that you can do while you're in the game? Well, basically you can spam dodge if you want to. That's not really a problem, even though enemies are going to catch you and they will punish this type of behavior, because perfect dodging in this game, or hitting the invincibility frames in your dodge, is actually quite challenging and requires quite a bit of practice. So if you just mash dodge like a maniac, enemies will catch up to you and eventually kill you. So, you know, there is no stamina, but that doesn't mean that you can just abuse everything. You can also attack non-stop if you want to, since there's no limit to the number of attacks that you can do. However, there are combos, and we'll get a little bit more into that further in the video. But yes, you can basically mash all of the different attack buttons and go to town, so long as you have the resources to perform whatever the thing is that you want to do. Although basic attacks and strong attacks don't really have a resource associated with them, it's just all about the timing. So then I drive you back to why is shield important? Because imagine this, if you have infinite stamina and you were just okay, I'm just going to go ahead and start blocking, how can the game tell you that, okay, I mean, you can't block anymore? And that is where shield comes in. Now, shield has two properties. Initially, whenever you take damage, first you take damage in the shield, more damage in the shield. You still take damage in your hit points, but you'll take more damage on the shield, and you take a little bit less damage on your hit points. Then eventually, when the shield gets completely depleted, then you're going to take more damage on your hit points. But another important thing is that shield starts getting depleted as you block. So if you are blocking enemy attacks and you don't really make an effort to like perfect dodge or parry or anything like that, then eventually your shield gets depleted and the mob is going to burn right through your block. This is one of the things that can get a little bit confusing in the beginning, because you might be like, oh, but I was blocking and the enemy was able to just break my block. Yes, because you ran out of shield, and when you run out of shield, enemies just continuously hit you, and it doesn't matter if you're blocking anymore or not. You're going to have to either land a parry or a perfect dodge in order to be able to get away with it. But that is the importance of shield. But shields are not just something that is important to you, they're also important to the enemy. And we're going to get into the why of the enemies as well, because that is of particular importance. So first, how exactly do you lock on to enemies? It is how you usually lock on to enemies whenever it comes to Souls-like games. You press down on R3. that is going to target them. You can then, move the stick left or right if you happen to have more targets on screen, and it will swap to the different targets that are available to you so that you can lock on to whatever you feel like locking on. But once we lock on, you will notice that we now have access to a couple of more information that you can see on top of the enemy. So at the very top there, you will see a couple of white squares. Those kind of match your HP, so that's fairly instinctive. That is the enemy's HP. Once that reaches 0, he dies. Immediately below those, you'll notice that there's a couple of blue squares. Now, I understand that you're not going to be able to, maybe see them if you're watching this on your cell phone or something. So I'm going to put those squares right in Eve's ass so that you can take a good look at them. Right there. You see those? Those little blue pips represent the enemy's shield. So basically, if you hit them, notice that first it goes to the shield. Even though it does deal a little bit of damage to his hit points, first you're going to hit the shield. And so if you want to really deal massive damage to an enemy, you'll want to break through their shield first. And then eventually, depending on whether you're fighting specific bosses or something like that, their shields might regenerate at certain points, and same thing for some of the enemies in game. But in this case, he's not going to regenerate, so if we keep hitting him, eventually it is going to break, and now he's going to take additional hit point damage if we continue to hit them. Particularly if we start going deeper and deeper into more complex combos, it's going to deal more and more damage. Now I'm going to restart here to get him like all readied up again. But yeah, they have shields, and it works pretty much the same way that it works for us. With the exception that I don't think it really applies to them blocking, because not a lot of enemies really block, so the shield for them works more like additional armor than necessarily for blocking. But it has another mechanic, and that mechanic is, once you break their shield, you'll notice that there's going to be a special animation for it. You see how he like bleeds all of this oil in the ground? Different enemies will have different animations, but they'll have something along those lines. This is because you've busted their shield, and if they happen to be performing an action while you break their shield, they are going to get interrupted. So this allows you to plan ahead of time, and if you know, okay, the shield break's about to come, you'll know that you can keep pushing the offensive because you're going to break the shield and interrupt whatever they happen to be doing, and you can keep pushing. So keep that in mind as something that you can kind of like use to push your advantage whenever you're close to breaking a shield, because different enemies will have different shield levels, and bosses will also have different shield levels. And this is also important because different attacks will affect shields and hit points in different ways, which we'll talk more about. Now, the other thing that you have below there is you'll notice you also have these little yellow pips below the blue dots, right? You can see those little yellow pips right there. Those are the balance gauge of the enemy. And what that does is basically, it works kind of like Sekiro's posture gauge. So if you're able to damage that, which is done by either parrying or doing certain moves. So for instance, one of the moves that does it is one of the beta skills, the square beta skill. It can actually damage their balance, which you notice right there. We destroyed one of the balance pips. If you destroy all 4 of them, eventually you'll be able to do a visceral attack on the enemy. But like I said, this can be done not just by attacking, but it can also be done by parrying. So for instance, if I activate enemy attacks here for a little bit, landed one parry. I'm a little bit rusty with this enemy because you don't actually fight this enemy all that often in the game. So you'll have to forgive my little rustiness here. Come on, attack me again. There you go. See? And eventually you get this, and you can do an execution on him called Retribution, which, as you can see, deals massive amounts of damage. So parrying is one way to do it. Burst skills is another way to do it. So like this particular burst skill, the triangle burst skill, deals a ton of damage. But like I said, you're not going to have these available at the very beginning, so keep that in mind. You're mostly going to be relying on parrying earlier in the game in order to be able to break their balance gauge to get those executions. But if you suck at parrying, don't worry about it, because this is not a mandatory thing. Although obviously you'll want to try and get good at parrying because you're not going to be able to just block your way through the game. But yeah, those are the three different types of energies you see on the mob. If you happen to be fighting a boss, they have the same thing, except it shows up centered and much bigger on top of the screen, but the UI elements are exactly the same. So now you know the UI elements, you know how shields work and how balance works. Now, a couple of more things that you'll see in the UI. If you notice on the bottom left-hand side again, there's like a little D-pad symbol there. Now, up D-pad is your universal healing item, of which there's a bit of a variety of healing items that you can use. I can't really show them to you in training, but those are fairly intuitive. It's nothing really too complex. It's like, hey, you hit up on D-pad, you heal. And those heals get refreshed whenever you rest at a camp, which works very much like a bonfire. It respawns all the Natiba in the regions, but at the same time it also refreshes your healing items, and it's upgradable so that you can get more heals as you play through the game. Now, bottom D-pad or down D-pad, that gives you access to your grenade consumables, which there's actually some really useful grenades. I kind of wish I could show you this in training mode, but unfortunately the game doesn't let you do it. And in this save file, I'm at the end of the game because this is the only way to get access to like all of your skills so that I can show you a bunch of different stuff. But fundamentally, I'll tell you guys what each of the grenades does, but don't sleep on grenades. I know that I did, and then near the end of the game, I was like, oh, grenades are actually really, really useful. So I'll tell you what they do, and it's going to be up to you guys to figure out when you want to use them. But fundamentally, the most basic one of all, which is the one that you'll have available most of the time, just knocks enemies down. And you might be like, oh, that's not a big deal. Trust me, creating openings where you knock enemies down is going to be absolutely god tier in this game, okay? Now, another gauge that you'll notice is that little orange thing that keeps circling around. Now that, I'm just going to refer to that as the Spartan mode. It charges up the better you are playing through the game. And basically you're going to press L3 and R3 to trigger it. But I don't want to show it to you because even though it's not really that spoilerish, I kind of think it's a little bit. So I'm not going to show it to you, but just remember that works kind of like Spartan Rage. That's all you really need to know. She powers up, she goes into super mode, and you can beat the crap out of everything. All right? That's what that thing does. Now, you've seen the entirety of the UI. Let's talk about basic movement. So Eve pretty much moves like you would expect from any third-person action game. You move the character using the left stick, you move the camera using the right stick, you lock onto enemies by pressing down on the right stick, and, you know, super easy. You dodge by pressing circle. You have a double dodge available at some point. You don't have it at the very beginning, but later in the game it does unlock, and I would highly recommend that you would put some points into it because dodging in this game can get very, very challenging. As a matter of fact, we're going to go over a couple of skills that I would recommend for you guys to pick up in the skill tree a little bit further in the video, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But yes, you can dodge, you can also jump, and then you have two types of basic attacks, which is your square attack, which is kind of like light attack, and then you have your triangle attack, which is a heavy attack. Now you can do a very basic combo by pressing square 4 times, and you can do another basic combo by pressing triangle 3 times. But this game has much more complex combos, some of which will have to be unlocked in the skill tree. I would actually recommend unlocking all of them, if not just for variety's sake, but also because, in my opinion, they are better. One of the things to keep in mind is that hitboxes are very important in this game. So for instance, if you happen to be doing the heavy combo here, you notice how she flips in that final move in the combo? So if an enemy happens to do a low sweep attack while you're doing this, they will actually not hit you. Not to mention that your blade only hits what it connects with. So if you happen to be in an AoE situation, you're going to want to use a combo that deals more slashing, arcing attacks. So for instance, a good combo for AoEs, I find, so long as you have enough time to do it, because sometimes you're getting really overwhelmed and you just got to dodge a bunch and look for an opening, right? But if you have enough of an opening, you can go square, triangle, triangle, triangle. See, this is a pretty decent basic combo that does a lot of slashing motions and gives you, allows you to basically hit multiple enemies. On the other hand, if you're fighting just a single enemy, one of the combos that I would recommend, and this is a lengthy combo, would be triangle, square, triangle, square, triangle. So it's basically just alternating heavy attack, light attack, heavy attack, light attack, heavy attack. You can't do the opposite because the opposite is only a 4-hit combo. I mean, you can do it, but it's only going to be 4 hits instead of 5. So it'd be like square, triangle, triangle. There's also one which I believe is triangle, square, square, and then triangle again. Which, big heavy hits, big swings for like single targets. But basically when it comes to combos, there is a pretty lengthy list that you have access to. If you go to the pause menu and then you go to manual and there's like a section there just for combos, I would recommend you check that list and see which combos feel more appropriate for what, because I'm not going to be giving you every single combo here because it'd be like a whole video. Not to mention that basically when it comes to combos, it's like do whichever one feels good, because the damage differential isn't too massive, at least on normal difficulty, which is the first one that you're going to be playing. Maybe when it comes to hard difficulty, things will get a little bit more complicated, but yeah. Now, another thing that you can do is you can rush. So if you look to the bottom right-hand side, that is where you can see the different abilities that you have available to you, whether those are the beta abilities or the rush abilities when you press R1. You'll also notice that there's an arrow on top there. That arrow basically indicates your rush gauge. So the rush is just something where you hold down on triangle and Eve does a gap closer, but it has a cooldown, as you can see right there. So this is in case enemies move away from you. When you need to close the gap, you hold down on triangle, she's going to move in. This attack eventually also gets follow-up attacks, which you can skill into on the skill tree. So like for instance right now I can do triangle and then follow up with another triangle attack, and she does that. You can also do triangle and then follow up with triangle plus circle. There's the refresh, which does that, which is better for AoEs. In a lot of situations, what you'll notice is that several of the attacks are better for AoE, whereas several others are better for like single target. That's one of the things that you'll want to pay attention to as you play and practice more, because I can't just be like, oh, use this in AoE, use this in single target. It's going to be very dependent because different enemies work in different ways, and this is just something that you're going to have to get into your system as you practice the different combos, okay? Now, besides dodging, you also have blocking. Like I've already mentioned, blocking uses up your shield. So one of the things that you'll want to try and do is instead of blocking, you'll want to parry. Now, parry is going to basically be last second blocking. So you block right as you're about to get hit. And the same thing for perfect dodging, because this game does have perfect dodging. So I'm going to turn on enemy attacks. I'm going to try to show you guys a perfect dodge. I kind of suck at perfect dodging, to be quite frank, because I tried parrying everything in this game, because it's also a lot safer, because the thing about parrying is that if you miss the parry, you still have the block. If you miss the dodge, you're just getting hit. Now, the downside of this is that there are some moves that enemies do, like sometimes they'll glow yellow, and when they do those moves, those cannot be blocked. So they have to be dodged. You either have to not be there, like you can run away, remember, because you can run even though you're locked on. You can press down on L3 and Eve is going to start running. Or you can simply mash dodge a bunch and hope for the best. But basically, when the enemy glows yellow, blue, or purple, you're going to need to dodge. And blue and purple are different dodges. We're going to get into those specifically. But for now, let's just turn on enemy attacks and try to do a couple of perfect dodges. There it is. That's a perfect dodge right there. Right there. There's another perfect dodge. We were able to get 2, huh? Not too bad. It's better than none. But yeah, this requires a lot of practice. Now, some of the other dodges that you need to do, like the blue one and the purple one, are significantly more accessible. You guys will see why, because the game actually gives you a tell. But yeah, that's perfect dodging. So now let's talk about parrying. Parrying is basically just about blocking at the last second. The thing is, they also switch up the timings on this guy. And these are fairly tight. But right there, those were 2 parries. That's another 2 parry. And then eventually you get the retributions with the parries, which is why usually I go more for parries than dodges, right? But yeah, that's perfect blocking as well as perfect dodging. That's how that works. Now the thing is, eventually, once you do this enough, you can also get special abilities on your tree that allow you to do counterattacks. And those are done by holding down either square or triangle depending on the type of counterattack that you're doing. Hey there, quick editor's notes. As I was editing this video, I noticed that I forgot to mention that these particular counterattacks that I'm talking about at this point in the video also happen to consume the beta energy that you use to cast your beta skills. So if you're trying to save up to cast a beta skill, it's probably a bad idea to use these counter moves, so make sure to keep that in mind. Also, a little bit further ahead in the video, I'm going to be talking about the follow-up moves to the counterattacks. And those follow-up moves consume burst energy. So again, if you're saving up to use one of your burst skills, you might want to hold off on doing these counters and following up on them with a follow-up attack as well. So keep that in mind because, like I said, I forgot to mention in the video. My apologies. Carry on. Now, triangle is usually better for AoE counterattacks. So if you're fighting multiple enemies and you hold triangle, because it does kind of like a sweeping slash, like this, right? Whereas square is better if you're solo targeting, like this, because it goes more for a thrust. So basically you hold down either square or triangle after doing a perfect dodge or a perfect parry, and you get these special attacks. Now, countering from dodge is easier than countering from parry because perfect dodging gives you more invincibility frames. Whereas parrying, like if I parry one move and he's coming in with another one, he will interrupt the counter. So you have to keep that in mind. So that is the square counter. There's also a triangle one. And then eventually it even gets a little bit more complicated because you can have these situations where you can do two counters. Which, to be honest, I haven't really done those that often. And those are things that you need to skill into the skill tree as well. But basically what you do is you either hold square or triangle and then you go for triangle plus circle. Like so. That would be a square double counter, kinda, from a parry. So it's like block this, you do square, and then triangle and circle. Except in here we got a retribution because he was in that position. And it's the same thing for dodges. So if we get like a perfect dodge, and then you hold down square, and then triangle and circle, you get that. Now notice that those also use burst gauge, so these only become available once you unlock your burst gauge. So keep that in mind. Very satisfying, but very, very, very tricky to pull off. Now, luckily enough, if you need to practice this, they will actually give you the practice option, which is what we're doing here. But like, let's say you specifically want to practice these crazy counters that I'm talking about. So you go to the survival tree, which is where these counters are located, and you look at the skill that you want to practice. So say, for instance, here, we were doing the chain reflection from square because it looks really badass. So you can go ahead and you just hit square on any of these abilities, and the game is going to, kind of give you the information that you need in order to be able to do it. And the enemy is also going to be automatically attacking you to set up for everything. So now you do this, and you get to practice it. That's one of the really cool things about practicing, by the way, is that you can really practice just about everything. So if there's something that you don't really know how to do when you're really trying to nail it down, like say for instance we want to do the parry, triangle into triangle circle, we go over here to counter chain 2, press square, and now we just have to try and get the thing done. Come on. Which would be this move. So always keep that in mind if you're like, oh man, I'm getting really overwhelmed with this one move. Go to the training. Just open up your thing. This needs to be done in a camp, by the way. So you're in one of these supply camps or one of the regular camps. You go up to the skill screen, and then you just select the thing that you want to practice, and you can keep practicing it. Now, let me go ahead and swap back into this one because I don't want to have the enemy always attacking me. Although we could turn it off because there's like all these settings that we have over there on the left side. But yeah, so that's perfect dodging, perfect parrying, follow-up attacks, all of that good stuff. Now, like I've also mentioned, there's two special types of dodging. Perfect dodging, that is. So one of them I call the blue dodges, which are blink. It's actually called blink. I just call them blue dodges because the enemy glows blue. And this is almost like the Mikiri counter in Sekiro, where basically you just dodge forward when the enemy does this special attack. So notice how he glows blue, and after a while our sword also glue blue. Now I purposely didn't dodge that so that you guys can see the glow on the sword. You see how there's like a flashing on the sword right before the time is right? This is important for you to know. And let me actually turn off enemy attacks for a little bit. This is important for you to know because different enemies are going to have different timings. So when it comes to this specific blink dodge, which you should only ever do when an enemy is glowing blue, different enemies will have different timings. And what you need to pay attention to is not to do it always on the same timing, but to do it immediately when it glows on the sword. So let's go ahead and do this again. You just press forward and circle, and it lands every time. And it stuns the enemy, which is really good because it leaves them open for additional follow-up attacks. Again, this one, unlike perfect dodging or even parrying, is super easy, okay? Just requires a little bit of attention. Pay attention when the cross comes over on the sword, and boom, Bob's your uncle, okay? Super easy. Remember, you can practice it too. But most importantly, remember that this specific attack has different timings depending on the enemy that is doing it. So don't memorize the timing, memorize the glowing of the sword. And then the other one is going to be Repulse, which is the exact opposite. There's going to be a purple glow on the enemy, and it's going to be the same thing. First the purple glow comes on the enemy, then it comes on the sword. So watch this. See, there it was. The purple glow on the sword. If you miss it, you're going to get punished really hard. It sucks. It is what it is. But pay attention again. He's going to do it. Purple glow on the sword. So instead of letting him grab you like this, once the sword glows purple, you're going to do back dodge. This is going to kick him in the face. And now you'll notice that this particular one, Repulse, is really cool because it reveals a weak spot in the enemy. So if you notice there, the enemy was actually glowing yellow after we did it. So that becomes a weak spot and you can shoot it. So let me actually go ahead and turn off the attacks. Because I just mentioned something that you guys are like, wait, you said shooting. Yes, this game has shooting. This is also not available at the very beginning of the game, but it becomes available a little bit later on. Shooting basically consists of pressing the left trigger. That gives you your aiming, and then you just aim with the right trigger, with the right stick, and then you shoot. Now there's multiple different types of ammo. So if we actually, while we're holding the left trigger, if we press down on the D-pad, that is going to let us select through the different types of ammo. Not all of this is available. These require you to actually go into an upgrade tree specifically for the drone in order to unlock different types of ammunition. So the one up top is slug, and you can play through the whole game just using slugs if you don't like to mess around with special attacks all that much. But there's different types of ammunition. So slugs is just, it just shoots. Now there is limited ammo in the game. We have unlimited ammo because we're in practice, and depending on the ammunition type that you are using, that limit is going to be different. So let's actually go ahead and swatch, for instance, to swap to a shotgun. I'm going to swap the shotgun. And this one has a bigger delay between shots, and it requires you to actually press the button. It's not automatic. But it deals a decent chunk of damage. It's more spread out, so if you have like multiple smaller enemies, it's useful. Then we have the blaster cell, which is a massive laser. It has 3 levels of charge, even though in the beginning you can only charge it once, but eventually you get to skill it up and you can charge it more. However, this, in my opinion, is the weakest type of shot, because you're very vulnerable while you're doing this, and most of the times, the time it takes to charge this, your opening is gone. So while this is really cool and sounds great, in practice, it's not that awesome. But anyway, the other ammunition type that we have is Stinger. This is a missile. Again, you'll have to upgrade this, but basically you press the trigger, you hold it, it locks on, release, fires a bunch of missiles at your target. And then the other one is Explosive Shell, which is the best one because it's almost like firing a mortar blast. But technically speaking, this is a shotgun shell. But it just feels like a rocket launcher. It feels great, but it's very, very limited. So if you don't want to deal with range too much, I would just focus on slugs because they do the job. Like most of the bosses that I've killed, I usually use slugs, and I only ever used some of the other ammunition whenever I was running low on slugs. But this one is one of the better ones, hands down. So anyways, let's get back to the practice because, you know, I just wanted to introduce the concept of shooting, but the idea why we're introducing the concept of shooting is in the context of the purple dodge, which is called Repulse. So let's go ahead and turn enemy attacks on again. We just want special attacks because that is what is going to get us to do that dodge. So you dodge, he exposes this little yellow thing, and you shoot him in it because that's a weak spot. It's fantastic. Certain bosses do this as well, so this is a good thing for you guys to practice. Okay, again, dodge back, he opens up, and you start blasting him straight in the face, and you shred him. Now keep in mind, if you want to preserve ammunition, you don't have to do that. So you can instead, you know, wait for him to do it, do the dodge, and then you can close the gap with the gap closing ability that we talked about, which is Rush. And so you don't have to waste ammunition if you don't want to, but ammo is always going to deal more damage in this situation than melee hits because that specific thing, it's just a mechanic. The mechanic of Repulse is all about just shooting enemies. Hey, I missed the dodge. The mechanic of Repulse is just about, you know, comboing the dodge into a shooting thing. So keep that in mind. Pretty useful, particularly for bosses. Fantastic. Bosses and enemies like this that do these attacks, all good. So now, let's jump out of this and let's talk about those different skills that I told you guys at the start. So we're just going to jump in here. Boom. And those skills are the beta skills and the burst skills. So each of the faceplate buttons represents one of those skills. We're going to start with the beta skills. And if you press down on L1, it's going to take us into a block. And then from there, you get to choose which one you want to do. So we're going to go from X and we're going to go clockwise. And I'll explain all of these abilities. So X, which is this kick, is very good at breaking shields. That is the specialty of this particular beta skill. So if you, for whatever reason, need to break an enemy's shield as fast as possible, this beta skills is one of the best ways to do it. So like, for instance, I'm going to use one of the other skills. Let's say, for instance, the circle skill. Well, actually, this enemy is so weak that my circle skill just shreds through his shield. But fundamentally, just know that the kick's ability is busting through shields, okay? And you can charge this, by the way. So, and by the way, these are all set in stone in terms of which faceplate button they're for. So the X is always going to be this one, unless like maybe you rebind your controls or something, but I don't even know if you can do that. So basically hold down on L1 and then you do X. She's going to do a kick, but if you charge it, she does 2 kicks. So you hold it and she does 2 kicks. And these absolutely shred the shield of pretty much everything. Like if it's a boss, it's not going to break the shield in one go, but it will deal more shield damage than anything else in your arsenal. So that's what the X beta skill is for. Now, if we go to square, square is really good because it will do a ton of damage, but on top of doing a ton of damage, it also messes with the enemy's balance. Now, square eventually can be upgraded for 2 inputs. So if you only do it once, she does this, and it doesn't break the balance. But eventually, after you skill into it enough, you can mash square a little bit while you're doing this, and she does a follow-up, and that one damages the balance of the enemies. So that's like the specialty of this one. Lots of damage, multiple hits, and on top of it, it also damages the enemy's balance. Now, if we look at the triangle ability, that is all about AoE. You can charge it as well, and it does tons of AoE, but it also does a whole lot of damage. And the specialty of this one is basically, I think it also knocks down enemies. Although I don't know if I skilled into it enough for it to allow the knockdown. But tons of damage, lots of AoE. In terms of the circle skill, the advantage of that one is that it's ranged. It will knock down enemies, and it has 3 waves that it can shoot, and it is also ranged. That's the advantage of this one. It deals way less damage, but it's ranged. And it knocks them down. So it's good. But those are your 3 beta skills, and you're going to want to invest points into them. My recommendation would be pick which one you think is going to be the most useful and level that one up. See, what I did was I leveled the crap out of this one, which is called the triplet. It is the square ability. See, they're lined up like this because it represents the 4 faceplate buttons in the skill tree, right? So this one will be triangle, this one will be circle, this one will be cross, and this one will be square. So personally, I leveled up square first, and I got all the nodes on square because this is the one that I was using the most because of the sheer amount of damage it does and the fact that it also damages enemies' balance gauge to enable me to use the execution, the retribution thing. But maybe you want to use the one that deals the ranged thing, which on my second playthrough is probably what I'm going to do, right? So, you know, it's really up to you which one you want to level up the most. Maybe you want to break shields faster, so you level up this one first. But really, I don't know if there's like a best option, but I think that triplet is really good. I really liked using triplet, so, you know, but I'm pretty sure that Cowboy probably scaled into the circle one first because that one gives you the knockdown. I think this one gives you knockdown too. No, this one doesn't. This one just deals damage. It's really good at dealing damage, and it stuns them. It stuns them, but knockdown is way better. So yeah, Cowboy, I think, used this one, the circle ability. So, you know, to each their own, but I would recommend maxing one of them out early instead of spreading your points all over them, because they all use the same resource. So you'd rather have one that hits really hard rather than have a bunch of them that don't hit that hard since they're using the same resource, right? So let's enter training again, and now we're going to be talking about burst skills. Now remember, like I told you, these only become available later in the game, but they're used by pressing R1, and each of these is going to do something different. So this time we're going to start once again cross, and then we're going to go clockwise. When it comes to cross, it gives you a buff, which you can see right there. Overdrive, it costs 3 pips. These are more expensive than beta skills. The beta skills only cost 2 pips each, but the burst skills cost 3 pips each and 4 pips for the circle skill. But there's good reason for that. So the X skill is basically a buff. It increases the damage that you deal for a short period of time. So this is just straight up a damage buff as well as attack speed buff. So you attack faster, you deal more damage. It's really good if you're into that type of stuff. The thing is, me personally, I don't like having the damage buff for a limited amount of time because you might end up using it in a situation where there's not enough openings for the boss. So that one requires really good knowledge of boss openings to be able to really capitalize on it. So that was not one that I used a whole lot, because also remember, your skill points are limited as you are progressing through the game. So in here, when it comes to burst skills, I would also very much advise you to pick one that you can kind of stick with, right? Now, when it comes to the square, this one deals a ton of damage. That's kind of like its thing. It deals a lot of damage, and I believe it knocks down enemies. Well, in this case, we flat out killed him because he's kind of a weak sauce, but let's go ahead. Yeah, this one knocks them down. So again, imagine stacking these 2 knockdowns, and you can keep the boss going on kind of like this knockdown thing, right? So you would use, say, for instance, the beta skill of circle, which knocks them down. And then as they're getting back up, you go up to them and you're like, okay, and now burst square. And you knock them down again. And then you can go up to them and you can drop the grenade. And you knock them down again. So you can keep these knockdowns going, which is really, really powerful. But anyway, we can't actually do grenades here, so my apologies. But continuing onwards, so that is square. Square is good for knocking them down and dealing a decent chunk of damage. Now, triangle is actually the one that I invested in the most, because the triangle burst skill, what it does is it messes with the balance of the enemy. So like, look, I'm going to use it. Boom, that's 2 pips of balance down, which I would then combo with the triplet, which was the other thing that I was doing, the beta triplet skill, and boom, and that's 3 pips down. So you can really get a good synergy going with the triplet and this one. So the thing is, it really is all about which abilities you're using and what type of builds you want to do, knockdown builds, balance damage type builds, all of that stuff, and figure out which ones you also like using the most. Because one of the things I'll tell you, while I really like the effect that this skill has, the damage is just not there. It doesn't deal that much damage because it relies on you breaking their balance to get retributions, right? So it deals way less damage than the other burst skills. So it's great for break and gauge, but at the same time it's hard to use because it's got limited range, because it's a small AoE, and on top of it doesn't deal as much damage as the other one. So there's a big drawback. So risk, reward, all of that stuff. But I really liked it. But I think in my second playthrough, I'm going to go for this one instead, the square ability. But anyway, finally we have the circle ability, which is the one that everybody is going to want because it deals the most damage, but it also consumes the most pips. Because notice all of the burst skills, like X, square, triangle, they all consume 3 pips, but on the other hand, the circle skill consumes 4. So it deals more damage, deals more shield damage than any of the other burst abilities as well. Deals the most damage as well as the most shield damage of any burst ability. That's the advantage of the circle skill. And it is also chargeable, so you can do it just like you press the button and she goes. And that's not that much damage. Or you can charge her up. And it deals a little bit more damage. So, even though I don't think I have this one skilled, so it might not deal as much damage as I would like, but, you know, that is how beta skills work and burst skills work, and how you can go about choosing which ones you want to use. You know, it's really going to be up to personal taste. You might want to rewatch this part of the video a couple of times if you want to get more information on each of them, or you can just read them on the skill tree because you'll see what each of the upgrades does. Now, finally, there is one more thing that you can do that also uses beta energy, and that is the beta finishers. So when you're doing a combo, so like let's say for instance the combo that I was talking about earlier of square, triangle, triangle, triangle. Eventually in the tree you'll be able to get an upgrade that lets you hold down the final triangle for additional damage, but it uses a unit of beta. So you go square, triangle, triangle, and then hold triangle, charges it up, deals more damage, but it uses 1 unit of beta. I'll be real, I didn't really use these all that much, but basically it's at the end of every combo, you keep the button pressed, and it deals more damage. So like for instance, this can also be used with triangles, square, triangle, square, and then hold down triangle. It's a little bit tricky to use. Like I said, I didn't use them all that much, but you can charge that in the end, deals a little bit more damage, uses 1 pip of beta. Personally, I didn't really find these to be all that worthwhile because I always found that actually using the beta skills was way better. But, you know, it is what it is. Oh, and by the way, one of the things that I forgot to mention, probably should have mentioned this earlier, but the precision dodge counters and precision parry counters that we went about earlier, the ones that go triangle into triangle circle, those also use burst gauge. So keep that in mind. Yeah, those are most of the things that you need to know for combat. Naturally, you can also jump, and you can also do aerial attacks. And there's a special move in the air, which is you jump, press triangle, and this goes through enemies' guards. Because some of the enemies have like this annoying block thing that they do. Not too many, there's like 1 dude that does it, but this just goes through their guard. So you jump in the air, press triangle, bust through guard. And that can also be charged with the whole beta thing, as you can see right there. But yeah, these are the basics of combat and all of that good stuff, and now you guys know. So very quickly, let's go through the skill tree so that I can tell you guys some of the things that I would recommend you to get early on. Now, I know that a lot of you guys are going to be looking at the attack tree and you're like, okay, let's just jump in there. What do we want to get as fast as possible on the attack tree? And what I would say is actually slow down, champ. What you want to go is you want to go to survival tree. I mean, look, pick whatever you want. This is my personal recommendation for you because I think that some of the things in this game are actually a little bit tight. Like I've mentioned this when I was playing the demo. So one of the first things that they're going to tell you to get is going to be perfect dodge, because perfect dodge is not unlocked from the get-go, but they kind of force you to unlock perfect dodge. So one of the first things that I would recommend you to get is, where is it? Reflex boost, right here. Makes it easier to use perfect dodge. I would definitely recommend you to get this as fast as possible. And probably after that, you'll want to get double dodge. Although it also depends on at which point of the game you are, because to me, dodging, I feel like, is one of the harder things to do when it comes to Stellar Blade. So I would recommend perfect dodge is going to be mandatory. First point, definitely get reflex boost. Make it easier to get perfect dodges. And then you're either going to want to get the second dodge, or probably after you get the reflex boost, you want to get blink, because you're going to be hitting enemies that do this fairly early on. And being able to do this counter is really, really good. It is an absolute lifesaver. So get blink as fast as possible, and then also get repulse as fast as possible. Actually, no. You can probably go perfect dodge, reflex boost, blink, and then double dodge, and then repulse, which I think is what I did. And then eventually, once you get these, my recommendation would be focus boosts, which makes it easier for you to get perfect parry. Now, I know that a lot of you guys are probably going to feel compelled to like, oh, I want to get the counters. But notice that the counters, if you look at the top left-hand side, they use beta energy, which you'll want to use the beta skills. So that's one of the things that I would maybe recommend against early on. But again, it's going to be up to you guys. However you feel like playing, you do what you want. This is just my recommendation. I would get, reflex boost, into blink, into double dodge, into repulse, into focus boost. That's what I would get. And then I usually start getting like stuff that also gives me additional beta energy and all of that stuff, because that's also very useful. Eventually there's a bunch of more quality of life things that you can get here in the tree, but I wouldn't worry too much about those, because then you also want to start getting some stuff that is more offensive. So the next one that I would actually go for is, I think Assault comes by default, so you get this one pretty much for free, but then I would get Ambush. And Ambush is really, really cool. Ambush is basically backstabs. So if you want to get a backstab early, feel free to go for that as well. I might actually go for it myself. I still don't know how I'm going to be doing my second playthrough, but backstab is really good. So let me show you guys how this works. It's basically enemy hasn't detected you yet. Sneak up behind him. Ambush pops up. Press triangle. Boom. Dead. One hit. This is legit one of the deadliest things in the game. As a matter of fact, in some of the later levels of the game, I was just running around with this camouflage exospine, which boosts your stealth, and I would just backstab as much as I could, because if you pay attention to the way that enemies move, you can backstab them really nice, because you don't need to sneak up on them when it comes to this game. That's the beauty of it. You don't actually have to sneak like this and then wait for the ambush. You can straight up, if they have their backs turned, just run up to them and stab them on the go. And it is gorgeous. This thing is, oof, it is an absolute beaut. Like, you just run up behind an enemy. Oops. I think this one might have seen me because I ran in front of him. Let me just restart here. If you run in front of them, they'll see you, and even from the side, it's a little bit tricky. You'll have to practice this, but yeah, just getting up to them and doing the thing. Like, you see, because I went to the side, the bastards saw me. So now I can't backstab them. It's like the second they see you, you can't backstab them anymore because they're aware of your presence. But if they haven't seen you, you can run up to them, slash them open. Gorgeous. So I definitely recommend getting this one early-ish as well, which is really cool. And keep in mind that you should have ambush from the get-go. And ambush is also so good. Basically, sneak up to an enemy from a ledge, from something like, right, because we're above the enemy. And from this ledge, sneak up to them and assault. And you can also do this by, let's say the enemy's further ahead. You can kind of like jump, dash, and still do it. So you don't have to just, you know, do it from the ledge. You can straight up make the kill yourself. But this is kind of tricky because if you go in front of them, they'll see you and then it won't work. So this one requires a bit more practice than just backstabbing, right? But it can be done. It's just one of those things where I'm like, see? Like I even went a little bit backwards, a little bit sideways. The one thing that you got to be careful is do not go in front of them. Because the moment, like even if you're jumping well above them, but you're in front of them, it becomes really tricky to get these bad boys off. But yeah, these are some of the skills that I would recommend you guys pay attention to in the tree. Then, like I said, when it comes to these, the beta skills and the burst skills, my recommendation is choose one to focus on and put all of your points into that one before you move on to a different one. Because remember, they use the same resource, and, you know, being able to have one of those that is maxed out is going to be way more useful. And then eventually you're going to want to start working on combos as well. These are your basic combos. Let me just see. This is the square, 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 triangle, triangle. This one's good, but I would probably go down this line first, which is triangle, square, triangle, square, triangle, square, because I like doing this combo more than this one, personally. But to each their own. There's also stuff here that increases the power of Rush and gives Rush a couple of like chain attacks and whatnot. I don't find this to be that useful, so I didn't really go for those. On the other hand, getting additional beta energy recharge whenever attacks land and whenever you're doing stuff, this is very useful. So pay close attention to these bad boys. And yeah, and another thing, when it comes to both beta energy or burst energy, another thing to keep in mind is that different actions give you different types of energy. So right now we have limited energy, so you guys can see right there. Matter of fact, let me turn infinite energy on and off. So see that right now we don't have any bursts or any beta energy, right? Now notice what happens if we start parrying. If I'm actually able to start parrying, right? We got a little bit of beta energy for parrying. So the more you parry, the more beta energy you get. Although beta energy, you also get it by just hitting the enemy. But right there. So beta energy is all about parrying, right? And yes, I know what this sounds like. Beta energy. Whatever. But beta energy is all about the parries, right? On the other hand, burst energy is all about the perfect dodges. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to turn on special attacks. So the blink dodge, also look at the amount of burst energy we got from blink dodging, right? Blink dodging, repulse dodging, same thing. You get tons of burst energy from these perfect dodges. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want more burst energy, you want to dodge more. If you want more beta energy, you want to parry more. But you can also get beta energy by simply attacking. Okay? But that's the skill tree. That's pretty much all of the things that I would want to tell you guys about the skill tree. This guide is already way too long, but there's one more thing that I would like to bring up, and that is, we're going to go to the manual here because unfortunately I can't show you guys the city. But in the manual, by the way, there's so much information that you can look through about your skills, all of the things. So keep that in mind. You'll want to check some of this stuff in the manual here. But most importantly, camps. camps work like bonfires. There's two types of camps. So this is the basic camp, which doesn't actually have some of the upgrade functionality. And then there's the supply camp, which has a repair console that lets you upgrade some of the stuff in your character. So for instance, right now we're in one of those camps. So if I go over here, go to this repair console. In the repair console, you'll notice that I have a couple of weapon cores. Now, weapon cores only serve one purpose, at least as far as I'm aware. And I've already finished the game, so I highly doubt that there's any other use for these. But these basically increase your damage. So you want to make sure that you use them. So the second you come up on a repair console and it gives you the weapon core thing, use it. Enhance your weapon, upgrade it, do the thing. Same thing for all of these other things. So tumbler enhancement, this increases the amount of healing potions that you have. And gear socket increases the amount of gear slots that you have to put gear in. We're going to go over the gear as well in a little bit. But another very important thing is, so these are supply camps, they're scanning. You can use your drone to scan. This is fairly simple, gives you all the layout information and all of that stuff. Eventually you're going to get to a city called Zion. In that city, you're going to have access to a map, and the map is going to give you like exclamation marks, which are quests, and these are citizens' requests. You go in there, you talk to the citizen, they give you like a side quest. Now, if you're not the completionist type, you don't have to do these. It is not super important if you just want to enjoy the story, but there are certain things that it influences, but because I don't want to get into spoiler territory, I'm not going to get too detailed. Let's just say probably better if you do these, but you don't have to. They are optional. But there's citizens' requests, and then there's also this, which is a bulletin board that has a bunch of requests. Now, one of the things that I would like to point out is that as you complete quests in the bulletin board, more quests become available. So if you are somebody who's a completionist and you're like, oh, I only had like 2-3 quests in the bounty board. Yeah, but the more you complete, the more quests start popping up immediately. Okay? So keep that in mind. Another thing that I would really recommend, notice how there's a character next to the bulletin board. She's got like a little face mask. You can see her there. That character dressed in black, right? That character has a bunch of documents and stuff that she sells you. I'd recommend you buy those. And eventually she also sells you outfits. That's another thing. Each NPC in Zion has a reputation system. You guys like, oh, I have to grind rep? No. The way reputation works with these NPCs is basically you just buy stuff from them. The more you buy, the higher the reputation you get. And eventually some of them sell you outfits, some of them sell you earrings and cosmetic stuff. So you'll want to try and max out the reputation with these NPCs because they'll sell you additional things. There's a fishing minigame, there's cans that you can collect, and eventually you can upgrade your drone to get radar and all of that stuff. So yeah, there's tons and tons and tons of things. Now, in regards to equipment, you're going to be finding it as you navigate the different levels and all of that. Equipment doesn't really change EVE in any cosmetic sense, it's just stat sticks. So in the beginning, you only have one exospine, but then later in the game it unlocks and you can have 2 of them. And basically these are like your build defining things. So for instance, because I'm an old man, I'm using something that makes it even easier to perfect dodge and perfect parry. And I still kind of struggle with it at times. But there's stuff like if you're more into dealing more damage, there's stuff that also increases other aspects of your character. More crit damage, you can increase the damage of ranged abilities, you can use something that increases your grenade consumables, which we'll talk about as well. But yeah, this is basically the stuff that is going to define how you're going to be playing the game, essentially. And then there's also additional gear that is just more stat sticks. Like I said, this increases your shield. Personally, I like having a ton of shield. I like having burst recovery, so I got a bunch of burst stuff, as well as bonus beta energy recharge, because I'm all about just mashing the special abilities and stuff like that. And then you also get cosmetics that you can actually change the way that EVE looks. And I don't want to show too many of these because I want you guys to... Oops. And just like that, we were demonetized. Dude, equip something. But yeah, you can also have glasses and, oh yeah, this is for the drone. You can also change the way that your drone looks, and you can give her earrings and all of that, and you can even change the way that your teammates look as well. Now, the other thing that I also mentioned was grenade types. There's a couple of, all of these camps have stores and they have a bunch of items that you can buy. These WB pumps are essentially wake stones. So like you die, you can resurrect once in combat, and then you have to go back to the checkpoint and start over. So these are additional potions. So in case you run out of your regular potions, you can carry around 3 of these. So it's like 3 additional heals. There's also a regen potion. You can carry 4 of these. Then there's also ammunition for your gun, like I told you. But one of the things that I wanted to show you more, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to, also because this guide's already way too long, but is the grenades. These are things that you can use. They are consumables, and you can carry 3 shock grenades. These give you knockdown on enemies. Now remember how I told you that there's a beta skill that gives knockdown, then there's a burst skill that gives knockdown, then there's a grenade that gives knockdown? That's a whole lot of CC. Think about that. So shock grenade, really cool. Another grenade that I really like is the sonic grenade. This deals 2 pips of damage to the balance gauge. Highly recommend if you're trying to get a visceral attack in and you're like, oh man, I'm just missing like 2 pips. You pop one of these suckers and you get to do your visceral attack. Really good. Smart mines, in my opinion, kind of suck. I've actually seen enemies charge through smart mines and they don't detonate. So smart mines, whatever. And shield stuff, I don't know. I've never really used these. As you can tell, I have 79 of them stored. But like sonic grenades and shock grenades, these are actually really good. Do not underestimate the usefulness of these. SP initializer is for respec. Respecking is fairly easy. So don't be scared of applying skill points and all of that stuff, because fairly early in the game they're going to give you these, and these basically reset one whole tree. And the biotic field generator, I can't really talk too much about that because I didn't really use it. But anyways, that is my beginner's guide for Stellar Blade. Hopefully this helps you out getting started with the game. I know that there's some things that I didn't talk about because I don't want to spoil things for you guys. But yeah, hopefully this helps you out. If it did help you out, make sure to hit that like button because it helps me out a lot. Thank you all very much for watching. Subscribe for more Stellar Blade. I'm going to be streaming the whole game. Hope you guys can join me and enjoy that. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong. Stay safe. Peace out.